President Vladimir Putin uses his State of the Nation address to unveil Russia's new strategic strike capacities, including a nuclear-capable missile with unlimited range that can outsmart all existing air defence systems. Also to come, a Russia-sponsored ceasefire in a Damascus suburb fails for another day after terrorists shell an evacuation route, preventing hundreds of civilians from leaving the war-torn area. And Facebook admits it's still found no sign that Russia interfered in the UK's Brexit vote, despite a renewed effort to dig up proof. Hello, welcome. You're watching RT International. It's just gone 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in Moscow. Now, our top story this hour, President Vladimir Putin has delivered his annual State of the Nation address to the Russian Parliament, sharing his vision of the country's future. During the speech, he unveiled brand new Russian strategic weapons that he claimed can outmaneuver all existing missile defences. RT's Murad Gazdiev joins us live now. He's in central Moscow and was following what was said closely. Murad, good afternoon again. Just take us through then the key points.
Well, this was Vladimir Putin's 14th address, and the first hour of it was largely dedicated to domestic issues. It was incredibly ambitious, the things he called for and the things he said Russia must do now. He said it needs improvements across the board, massive new funding and expansion in infrastructure, in education, in healthcare, in social projects, as well as, making Russia a country that is lucrative, that is attractive to investors. He said now is a crucial period. In the next few years, if Russia falls behind, it won't be able to catch up to leading economic powers in the world. But again, some numbers for you as to how ambitious this is. In the next 10 years, Vladimir Putin called for a 50% increase in GDP, as well as to increase the life expectancy, average life expectancy by 10 years to 80. He also addressed outside concerns, security concerns, namely the United States and NATO, which had been expanding, building up in strength, establishing and setting up their own missile defense complexes surrounding Russia, basically, Vladimir Putin said, but no longer.
Russia is a major nuclear power, but basically nobody wanted to talk to us. Nobody listened to us. So listen to us now.
Things have changed since 2004, which is when Vladimir Putin was referring to. This time around, in his speech today, he unveiled a whole range of new weapons, bigger, faster, with greater reach, as well as more powerful, and first and foremost among those perhaps a new nuclear-powered, nuclear-capable cruise missile. He also unveiled or presented new very heavy intercontinental ballistic missile, laser weapons, an underwater drone that is capable of delivering nuclear missiles and traveling at speeds, much greater than than they could previously. There's also talk of more weapons that are being designed for the Russian armed forces, and the end goal here, it isn't to coerce anyone, it isn't to invade anyone or to threaten anyone, it is to establish parity in the world, to make this unipolar world a multipolar one, where different countries have different opinions and they're forced to talk to each other and to take each other's concerns into consideration.
Russia's growing military might is not meant to threaten anybody. We have no plans, and have never had plans, to use this potential to achieve offensive or aggressive ends. Russia's enhanced military power is simply a guarantee for peace on our planet, for it preserves the strategic balance of forces in the world.
There were similarities between this speech and the speech Vladimir Putin gave in Munich at the Munich Security Conference a decade ago, which caused shock, and it led to a gentle and steeper degradation of relations between Russia and the United States and NATO. But it remains to be seen how this speech will be met abroad.
Yeah, interesting stuff. OK, thanks, Murad. That was Murad Gazdiev for us in central Moscow. We can get more reaction now from Gilbert Doctorow. He's an independent political analyst and is with us now. Good afternoon to you, Gilbert. Thanks for coming on. Murad ended his piece there by saying we wait and see how the West will react to what President Putin said today. How do you think they will react?
Well, I think that this is a speech of enormous importance, and it will be discussed extensively in all world media, and particularly in the States, for coming days. Of course, there'll be a great deal of attention to the military hardware that he described, but I'd like to put his speech into two contexts. One is part of an electoral campaign, because we are in the midst of that, and yesterday, on the 28th of February, the 7 other candidates had their debates on the Первый Canal. And two, what was he saying to the West, besides showing off in a non-bluff way what Russia has achieved in military hardware? And coming back to the first point, the electoral campaign, he made the other candidates look like a kindergarten. All the discussion of the liberal and communist candidates was featured centered on the question of how can a country that only represents 2% of the global GDP, how can such a country which has only 10% of the military budget and 10% of the GDP of the United States, how can it compete and project its ambitions for a role in the world? The answer was clear: by being head and shoulders above the rest of the world, precisely in its defense capabilities, and demanding the respect of its capabilities and of its intelligence and of its people and their dedication through the development of these systems. So he has run circles around the competition. He also answered in a way a question that many in the West, for example the Financial Times, were posing on the day before his speech. What would he say about the economy? What kind of structural reforms would there be? The answer is that he said a lot about the economy, he said a lot about social welfare, but it was all in the nature of an evolutionary change, a continuation of programs that have been put in place around the country in pilot projects, and to generalize them for the sake of the move forward of Russian society and prosperity. As to the message to the West, it's extremely important. He said, and I believe I'm not misquoting, that Russia stood ready to defend its friends and allies with instantaneous response to any attack on them. If I'm not misreading, that means an attack on Syria, an attempt to remove the Assad regime, could result in a direct nuclear showdown with the United States. The same was true of Iran and of Russia's other friends, whom the United States has been trying to bully in every which way. I think that his purpose was to sober up the discussion, to move on from the Russiagate and all the frivolous talk that has captured the whole of US and Western media.
Just quickly, we haven't got much time, but I'd just like to play to you President Putin's view on why Russia has developed these new ballistic missiles. I think we can have a listen now. Essentially, he was saying it was in response to what the US was doing. Let's just listen.
Despite all our protests, the US machine started working. The conveyor belt started rolling. There are missile defense systems in Alaska and California. As a result of NATO's eastward expansion, they've set up missile systems at 2 new European locations. One has already been deployed in Romania, and another will be set up in Poland soon. Even now, they're working at full speed.
I mean, Russia has said since that speech it hopes that the US might reassess its foreign policy. Do you think that will happen, or do you think the US will just become more entrenched and will enter a new arms race?
Well, we already are in a new arms race. Entrenched, more entrenched, there's no way that can be more entrenched except when President Trump gets ready to press the nuclear button. We are at one another's throats right now. So I don't see an intensification of hostile talk or scheming and planning as in the cards. What is possible, and what was Vladimir Putin's intent, was to sober up the West and to bring them back to realities. I don't think anyone in the U.S. mainstream media is going to pay attention to the proceeding, to the cause of Russia's military buildup. They'll only look at the consequences, what Russia has done. But that's not a matter of importance. What Russia has done is breathtaking. And as I said, it will make the U.S. generals, the Pentagon, the whole military budget that's been endorsed by Congress look like chumps. So the United States, whatever it says publicly, is going to have a deep rethink of everything it's spending now on military, because it's useless.
That's an important point, isn't it, Gilbert? Because even Alexei Pushkov, he's a member of Russia's Federal Council, and he spoke to us just not long ago. He said, look, we expect an hysterical reaction from the Western media over this, but long-term, deep down, we hope it might mean a reassessment of foreign policy and perhaps an invitation to sit down with Russia and talk on equal terms about what can be done. Is that how you see it too?
At the minimum, nobody is going to speak about revising U.S. foreign policy. That would be politically unacceptable in the Congress as is presently constituted. Washington is deeply set against Russia. But what I think we may expect, it's very reasonable to expect, that in the short term there will be a calling upon Moscow to re-enter into overall full landscape arms negotiation talks. That is certainly the greatest likelihood, and it's certainly what Vladimir Putin is looking for.
OK, very interesting. Look, Gilbert, really good to get your thoughts. We appreciate your time this afternoon. That was Gilbert, Dr. O, independent political analyst. Thank you.